Hi all, this is Nelly, Ordinary People Saintly Souls, and I am now at the part where Valtorta saw the passion and the agony and the arrest at Gethsemane. And this is quite long, so I will probably stop this video at around 10 minutes, and I'm not quite sure when that will be, and then continue the same topic. But it starts with Valtorta seeing and describing how the apostles and Jesus leave the house where they had celebrated the Passover and learned about new rites, the washing of feet, the feet and the Holy Communion. And that she describes how Jerusalem, the streets of Jerusalem are dark and totally empty. There's nobody there. And as they are walking, the apostles are getting more and more worried, and while Jesus is walking ahead of them, they start to plot how to save him. They are plotting and planning because they still cannot accept what is going to happen, and they want him to be saved. And one of them said, we should really abduct him. And this is what makes Jesus sad. He describes that, and that's on page 265 of the 5th volume of the poem of the Man God. He said that what was most wounded was my feelings and spirit, because, Peter disowned me, and people were shouting death to me, but also, most of all, I was very hurt by what they, the pain that they caused my mother. And but this, what the disciples is doing, really is difficult for Jesus. And he, because they say, for example, Thomas says, we should not kidnap him. We should take him away and bring him to Bethany, to the house of Lazarus. And that's a safe place. And then we'll come back and we'll find the traitor Judas. And so they're getting louder and louder while Jesus, in a pensive mood, he's probably, because he knows what's coming, walks ahead of them. And again, they run up to him and say, "Save yourself, Jesus." And it really hurts him that they haven't learned to sing during the last 3 years. I mean, it's at one point, he says they are more human than they ever were, than they were before they met Jesus. And Jesus says again, I'm saving myself. I'm going to death, and you are going to faith. I'm saving myself. If I do not obey my Father, I would lose myself. So I save myself by obeying my Father. And he tells them to stop crying. And he even compares them negatively with the students of the Greek philosopher Socrates. And he says those were much braver than you were, because when their master had to execute himself by drinking poison, they did not leave him and stay with him. And again, we hear about Judas, and we find out that he was up to no good. They ask Jesus, did you actually know about this? I mean, how could you have taken him on as an apostle? And then Jesus says, I have always known about it, even before he became a disciple, and I tried in every way to send him away, so that his crime might not be perfect, both from the divine and the human point of view. Because those who want my death are executioners of God. And this disciple and friend of mine is also the traitor, the executioner of man. So, and does no one else know? They ask him. John knows. I told him at the end of the supper, tells Jesus. And then again, they start saying, what about Lazarus? Does Lazarus really not know anything? And Jesus says, no, he doesn't. And then Jesus tells them about the fact that they should go to Gamaliel, again Gamaliel. They say, when we arrive at Gethsemane, you will have to go to Gamaliel and tell him, you will shortly have the sign that you have been awaiting for 21 years. Nothing else. Don't say anything else. And then you will come back to your companions. And so again, Peter and Simon try to discourage Jesus from going through with it. And he says, Simon, it's the hour of my passion. To make it more complete, the Father is withdrawing his light from me as it gets nearer. Before long, I shall have but darkness and the contemplation of what is darkness, that is, all the sins of man, all the sins of humanity. And he says, this evening there are ghosts arising from the fogs of Satan, visions of nightmares and sorrows. The evening is developed in a hellish atmosphere. It is striving to create cowardice, disobedience, and sorrow in me. It will create disappointment and fear in you and in other people who are neither fearful nor criminal. They will become delinquents or fearful. And then Simon remembers that he actually is mad at Lazarus. And he says, he suddenly becomes irritated with Lazarus and says, he's a friend of the governor. He could have prevented all of this. Again, it's as if they don't listen to Jesus. He keeps telling them what is about to happen and why, and they're just ignoring him. And so Simon says, I'm going to him and I'm going to teach him a lesson, something like that, he says. And he also says, I feel that my mind is more deranged now than when I condemned myself. And it is so, Master, I am no longer myself. And why are you smiling? And Jesus says, because it confirms what I just told you. The fog of Satan is around us all. And then they let's see, where are we now? Because there's so much happening. But Jesus says you have to stop relying on yourself. You cannot do that. You have to rely on the divine. You have to pray to God. And again, they come back to Lazarus. If Lazarus had only listened to us and had come to the praetor, but he would not listen to us. That's what we've been doing, much and nothing. And they just say, they just feel useless and that everything is useless. And in the meantime, someone seems to have gone to Gamaliel and given him the message of Jesus. I don't know which one of the apostles. And Gamaliel answers to them when they told him that, I tell you that what you say is prophesied only for the Christ. And as I do not recognize the Christ in this prophet, I see no reason to be excited. He's a good man, a friend of God who will be killed, but of how many like him has Zion drunk their blood. And as we insisted on your divine nature, he stubbornly repeated, so the apostles who were there said, we insisted on your divine nature. They say that to Jesus. Gamaliel seems to have repeated, when I see the sign, I will believe. And he promised to abstain from voting for your death. So he might try to save you. Again, they have hope, which is so strange to see when I read through this, that they keep having hope, although Jesus tells them not to. And so then they arrive at the garden, and as we can read in the New Testament, Jesus goes up and takes with him Peter, John, and James, and he asks them not to fall asleep while he is praying. Well, as a matter of fact, they fall asleep 3 times. 3 times he comes back. And so in the next video, I will read about and tell you about the praying of Jesus in the garden and how he was really experiencing torture in his soul. This is Nelly, Ordinary People, Saintly Souls. See you in the next video.